We can turn them all on. Let's just not talk.
Well, once you go live, it does the push. So I would wait a couple of seconds for that one. This one looks like it's live already. It went quick.
Okay, good.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's fine. Let's, we could start 2:28. I guess
This one's on already.
That one's on already?
You'll have to click this until it's blinking.
Yep.
We're going to go live.
Okay.
We'll wait a couple minutes.
Yep.
I think it's good to send the push notification before.
Yeah, that's true.
So people are in before you do the introduction.
Okay, the mic is on live now. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll be starting in about 60 seconds. It's 2:30. Hi, welcome to our 7th episode of CryptoTalk. Today we will have a guest speaker, Jason Katz, who is our Chief Operating Officer. He's in a meeting right now, but he should be done momentarily, and he will join us in the second half of our episode. Before we get started, I'd like to just read off a legal disclaimer before we get started. And I'll read it again either at the end of the episode or in the middle of the episode. This discussion is for informational and educational purposes only. Viewers are advised to conduct their own independent research into any topics discussed, and the discussions are not the opinions of Camfrog, Paltalk, or PeerStream. So I'd like to first start out the episode with just a summary of the price of crypto or Bitcoin over the last week. This morning or this afternoon, the last time I checked, it was about 10,300, and it looks like it's been consolidating over the last few weeks at around $10,000. I would say it's a swing trader's dream because in the last 2 months, it's basically crossed over above 10,000 and below 10,000 about almost 24 times. So I think that's a great trade. If there are swing traders out there in our audience, obviously they've made money off this type of trade. Our short-term opinion is that it will be trading sideways for the next 2 weeks until the backed futures start trading. They're going to be starting to trade on September 23rd, and I think the jury's still out on if that's going to increase the price of Bitcoin or decrease the price of Bitcoin, or if it's going to stay the same. But I think a lot of people are waiting until the back futures start trading. The reason why there's a big difference between the backed futures and the other futures that are out there through CME is that these are physically they would have to physically deliver Bitcoin as opposed to the other ones where they're just cash settled. So these are Bitcoin settled as opposed to cash settled. And I think there's a lot of people that are still sitting on the fence if it's going to go up or go down. So I think that's one of the reasons why the Bitcoin price has been staying the same around 10,000. Obviously, long term, we think the price is going to go up a lot higher before the halving in May. And my personal opinion is that we think it might hit an all-time high again, where it'll exceed 20,000 between now and May of 2020. There's been a lot of positive developments since the last halving, and a lot of positive developments over the last, say, 3 to 6 months. Obviously, you see it's in the regulation spotlight a lot more. The president has mentioned it. There's a lot of exchange-traded funds that are looking to do Bitcoin. They haven't been approved yet for retail investors. But there's been a lot of positive developments over the last few months. Just last week, we had an Apple executive that confirmed the long-term potential of crypto. In San Francisco, CNN had a private event where Jennifer Bailey, who works for Apple Pay, she's one of the higher ups at Apple Pay, she basically was quoted as saying, "We are watching cryptocurrency. We think it's interesting. We think it has long-term potential." So I think that this is a major shot in the arm for crypto. Apple Pay processes over 1 billion transactions per month. So I think it's a good thing. And I think that Apple could be a leading force in the crypto marketplace. I even think it might be even a bigger announcement. If they announce something in crypto, it might even be bigger than Facebook Libra. Apple, I think, is in the spotlight just as much as Facebook, but I think Facebook has some negativity around their privacy issues that they've had recently, and I think Apple could be a big player in the crypto market. Another big player, which a lot of people who are viewing probably have accounts on Binance. As you know, today was the last day for U.S. citizens to trade on Binance. You could still have an account on Binance. You didn't have to close it down. But on the Binance portal or platform, they announced back in June in their terms of service that they would no longer allow deposits and trades from U.S. citizens. They did give us a 90-day grace period to September 12th, but they're excluding some all U.S. citizens from trading from their Binance platform. So what happened was they gave us a 90-day grace period. I think a lot of the people between June 14th and September 12th, which is today, didn't transfer a lot of their alts to cold wallets or transfer them to Coinbase or Gemini for two reasons. First is that they weren't allowed to transfer a lot of these tokens to Coinbase because Coinbase doesn't accept a lot of these altcoins. And they probably figured because the altcoins have been getting crushed in the last 12 months to 18 months, they basically said, I'd rather sell the tokens than basically transfer them to a cold storage wallet. So if you look at the price of Binance Coin, back in June when they made the announcement, it was $33 per token. If you look at it today, I think this morning when I checked, it was $20. So a lot of people were unable to transfer over the Binance Coin to Coinbase, Gemini, and some US-based exchanges. So what they did was they sold it. And that Binance Coin has obviously taken a hit by over 50%. Another thing that you could look at, a metrics that you could look at back in June, was the Bitcoin dominance. Back then it was 55%. If you look at it today, it's exceeded 70%. Now, I'm not saying that the Bitcoin dominance has increased because of all the people selling on Binance into Bitcoin, but I think it might have been a small factor in increasing the amount of Bitcoin dominance. An easy way to check the Bitcoin dominance for those of you who care, you could go onto CoinMarketCap, and on the top of the screen, it'll show you how many altcoins are out there. The last I checked was 2,700, but you could also check the Bitcoin dominance, which is obviously it's over 70% right now. The last time I checked. But in the meantime, in the last 3 months, Bitcoin also announced that they were going to be opening up a Bitcoin US exchange. Unfortunately, there was a gap between the day when they actually shut down their old their old Binance platform, and the new Binance US platform. It's a gap of about a week because they're not going to be accepting deposits until next week. I think they're accepting deposits on September 18th. And we closed, the U.S. investors had to move some of their money or leave it in there, but you can't trade it after September 12th. So there was a 1 week gap. It's unfortunate that you weren't able to just basically transfer all of your old your Binance holdings into the Binance US, but I don't believe that they're going to accept as many coins for trading. I think the last I checked, they were going to consider 30 tokens. They're going to start with only 6, and then they're going to ramp up to eventually to have 30 tokens. So the ones that they're accepting right now are Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, BCH, LTC, and USDT. So that's the 6 coins that they're going to start with. But if you notice, I didn't say the Binance coin. So there is no Binance coin allowed on the platform as of yet. They'll eventually add it, But I think that's one of the reasons why most of the people had sold their Binance coin, because a lot of the U.S. exchanges won't allow the Binance coin, and they didn't want to go through the trouble of putting it on a cold storage wallet. So I think a lot of the people sold the Binance coin, and that's what drove it down to $20 per token. I think they're in the process of. I think they probably think that the Binance coin is too risky, and they might run into regulatory hurdles in the United States by allowing that token. So I'm sure that they will allow that token later. And another thing that I'd like to mention is that they don't have a New York bit license yet, Binance. So even Binance US, even though New York residents are residing in the US as well, you're unable to open up an account there, or you're unable to deposit any assets into that Binance US account yet, because they're still waiting on their New York bit license. Another large company, obviously, that we all know of, or a lot of us have our assets, is in Coinbase. And CEO Brian Armstrong mentioned recently, and it's been in the news a lot, it's been on Yahoo Finance as well as a lot of the other blogs, he had mentioned a stat which is pretty staggering, that they're depositing 200 to 400 million a week into Coinbase. So if you annualize that, that's about $10 to $20 billion over the next 12 months that will be deposited into Coinbase if it stays on that track. It could be higher, it could be less, but that's also in addition to what Coinbase already has. So that's a pretty staggering fact, which I wasn't aware of, but it's been in the news a lot in the last week to 2 weeks. So that's pretty big news with Coinbase. Speaking of Coinbase, there's another big announcement that came out last night or this morning. One of the startups that they backed is called UMA. I guess it's pronounced UMA. They're a smart contract technology platform, and they made a pretty big announcement today that they're basically launching a new platform that will create tokens. And those tokens will track the price of anything, which is really unique because you could track the price of Apple stock, the price of oil, the price of foreign exchange rates, or any other things that you want to track. It sounds to me like it's a Wall Street derivative product. So basically, you're not really tracking the actual asset. You're actually just tracking the price. So I think a lot of people will be using this, or sophisticated investors will be using this to hedge their risk exposure to a lot of crypto assets. So say, for instance, you're shorting Apple stock on the stock market, and you want to basically hedge the risk on that. You might want to buy some of the tokens that are tracking the price of Apple stock where you long the Apple stock. And as you know, when there's new technology, there's a lot of price discovery that goes on. I think there might be possible arbitrage opportunities with these new products, because there might be some big discrepancies between the prices where some people, if you have the time or you have the energy, you could probably notice that there might be some assets that are mispriced. And you might be able to take advantage of that. So I think there might be some opportunities there with this new smart contract platform. You could also check, if you want, there's a part of the Coinbase website, it shows the ventures. You could actually see all the ventures that Coinbase is invested in. And I've mentioned this on several of our crypto talks. They've invested in a lot of crypto companies. Besides crypto companies, they've also invested in, which you don't really hear about, they invested in a whole bunch of broker-dealers back in 2018. So they don't really talk too much about that, but you could look that up as well. But if you go on to ventures.coinbase.com, I'm pretty sure you'll be amazed at the amount of companies that Coinbase is investing in. The last I counted, there were probably 4 dozen or 5 dozen companies. And each of the companies you could actually click on to find out what they do, and that's how you could check on their portfolio company UMA, or the company they invested in, and you could find out more information regarding the tokens that they're going to be creating that are going to track the prices of almost anything. So that's really good news. I'd love to hear all this new crypto talk and this crypto news that's basically positive, and it's moving things in the right direction. Another big announcement that I saw, which is hardware-based, the Galaxy 10 smartphone started selling the new phone last Thursday, I believe. They started selling it in certain countries, but it basically has a pre-installed cryptocurrency wallet. They originally announced it back in March and April. They followed through. They started selling these phones, but that's pretty interesting that the phones have pre-installed crypto wallets. So that's really exciting. I'm pretty sure Apple will follow. I'm sure they don't want to get left behind, similar to some of the other smartphones that we used to have when we were young that basically didn't adapt, and now they're out of business. So that's interesting information coming from Samsung with their Galaxy 10 smartphone. Another pretty cool announcement that I saw last week. There's something that a lot of college students are basically looking forward to, and it's called Satoshi's Treasure, where there's actually $1 million prize. So what they're going to do is, it's coming out this fall, and they're releasing, it's coming out to 24 college campuses worldwide. So we're going to get a lot of college students and a lot of, recent college graduates that are going to be playing this game. But they already have 100,000 people on the email list for updates. What they do is they put these 400 puzzle fragments basically that allow you to move from the Bitcoin wallet. So I think what they're going to do is they're going to have a lot of people that are in groups basically trying to pitch in all of their collective talents to try to win this $1 million. I believe this is their second contest that they ran. They had one back in early 2019, and I believe it was a success. I tried to log into satoshitreasure.xyz last Friday when I first heard of it, but unfortunately there were too many requests, and basically I received an error message that there were too many requests on satoshitreasures.xyz. But I wanted to find out more information, so maybe if anybody out there knows more information, you could write it in the bottom of the chat so we could find out more information about this on when it's launching. If not, I'll basically log in today or tomorrow or before the next show, and maybe we'll give you guys an update. So that's pretty exciting. Some more exciting news regarding the ETFs, or the exchange-traded funds. Obviously, we're still waiting for approval for them, but in the meantime, there were two companies. One was Van Eck and one was SolidX. They created, and it was approved, it's a Bitcoin ETF Lite. So it's not the full Bitcoin ETF that we're all waiting for as retail investors. This one is only available for institutional investors. They actually applied and received an exemption under SEC 144. SEC 144 has been around for a long time, and it applied to a lot of publicly traded companies. We're a publicly traded company. Our company name is PeerStream, and we have 144 exemptions as well for restricted stock. But basically, in a nutshell, they applied for this Bitcoin ETF Lite, where it was only available for accredited investors or institutional investors. And basically, once you meet 5 conditions, it could be exempt from SEC laws and regulations. So some of the exemptions, or some of the conditions that must be met are things like holding periods, disclosure regulations. There's some selling restrictions. So it's not as liquid as as an ETF or like a stock that's restricted. You can't really sell whenever you want. There's certain restrictions placed on that. But it's the same thing for the institutional investors. So there might be some long-term institutional investors that might start to invest in these products while they're waiting for the SEC to finally approve a regular Bitcoin ETF for all investors. So that's interesting. Interesting breakthrough on this Bitcoin ETF. There's also another condition that must be met if you wanted to sell this 144 ETF. You need to provide notice if the sale exceeds certain thresholds. So if there's a company out there, say an endowment or a hedge fund or some type of college that basically invested their money in this, and they invested, say, $5 billion in this ETF, or $5 million for argument's sake, they would have to provide certain notice if there's certain thresholds that are exceeded when they're going to be selling this product. So that's pretty interesting development. I was happy to see that, and I'm hoping that the SEC is happy with this product, and maybe they'll be more apt to approve one for retail investors. Some other big news that came out this week, Backed, which is basically the futures trading exchange that's going to open up on September 23rd, their warehouse is now open for business. So they launched last Friday, where they would actually, they're a registered custodian that will allow for safe storage of Bitcoin. So they started accepting deposits last week. They're actually accepting the deposits ahead of the launch of their futures product, which is on September 23rd. But this is pretty exciting. And as you know, we mentioned in previous crypto talks, this is the same infrastructure. Bakkt is the same infrastructure and controls of the New York Stock Exchange. Bakkt is owned by the New York Stock Exchange. So this is a step in the right direction. So I'm happy to hear that news. It's also going to be insured for $125 million. So that's a pretty big insurance policy in my viewpoint. It's also the first futures exchange, as we mentioned earlier, that's offering physically delivered Bitcoin. And some people questioned, there were some comments and some things that I read on Twitter that people were questioning the $125 million of insurance, to say, basically stating that it wasn't enough insurance and $125 million is nothing in crypto these days. And that's true to a certain point. But what you have to realize is that they're not going to be holding these in hot wallets. A lot of this stuff that they're basically taking deposits on is going to be held in cold storage, and it's going to be illiquid. I mean, they're obviously going to have a certain amount that they still have available for liquidity purposes, but most of it is going to be in cold storage. So it's not going to be as easy to hack. And I think that the $125 million of insurance is a good start, and I'm happy to see that there's actual insurers out there that are looking into insuring crypto. Let's see what else. Speaking of custody, I wanted to also mention that there was a big announcement from Gemini. So Gemini put out an announcement on Tuesday that they're introducing an institutional grade custody solution. So that's going to be huge. It's going to support 18 cryptos out of the gate. So this is probably, it's also going to be SOC 2 Type 1 compliant, which basically means that it's a lot more solid than some of the other companies out there in crypto, because a lot of them are not SOC 2 Type 1 compliant. They're looking to get Type 2 compliance, but it's being investigated right now. Once it becomes Type 2, that means it's even more solid. So I think that's a great announcement, and I was happy to read about that. I think this will help them compete with Coinbase. In the previous episode, in episode 5, we talked about Coinbase, their acquisition of Zappos, and how they had $7 billion under management right now. Sorry. So I think that this is huge. I think Gemini getting into the custody, institutional grade custody solutions is a step in the right direction. And also, if you remember, if you guys have read a lot of the SEC comments regarding the Bitcoin exchange traded fund, one of their sticking points was custody. So now you every single week you read about more custody solutions, or people that are looking into custody solutions, and they're actually not just putting these out as announcements, they're actually getting these things done. So hopefully this will give the SEC a level of comfort, and hopefully it'll give investors a level of comfort as well. Eventually, it won't just be institutions. I'm hoping that the retail investors will eventually be able to put some of their crypto into some of these custody solutions to give people a peace of mind. So let's see what other announcements. I think that was all the announcements that I wanted to discuss today. If anybody has any questions, you could basically write the questions, and Briley will bring them to me. She gave me some questions last week that we didn't have time to answer, and some people had emailed the questions to CryptoTalk@peerstream.com. So I could go over some of those questions with you, and maybe it'll educate all of us. These questions that people sent in. So the first question that was emailed to us. Also, if you could do us a favor and basically tell us where you're actually from, where you're emailing from, so we'll know. This person didn't write it down, but some of the other people did say where they were from. One person said, I'm thinking of buying Bitcoin. How do I know my Bitcoin won't get hacked? So that's a good question. as far as I know, Bitcoin hasn't really been hacked. It's mostly the exchanges or the service providers that have been hacked. So your Bitcoin, if you secure it properly, we went over that in the last episode. If you secure it properly, you shouldn't have to worry about it getting hacked. If you keep it on the exchange, which is also known as, say, a hot wallet, it can possibly get hacked. Some of the companies out there have a limited amount of insurance, like we just mentioned, the $125 million of insurance on Bakkt, and Binance was hacked several months ago, and they had a little bit of insurance or their own self-insurance that basically covered the hack. But if you basically take your crypto offline and you basically have it on a Trezor device or you could put it on a nano ledger. There's a whole bunch of cryptocurrency wallets that you could research on Google, and you could basically pick up one of those wallets and basically put it on one of the wallets, and you shouldn't have anything to worry about. So that was one of the questions we had. Okay, so this person is from New Jersey, and they're asking for an update. We spoke about Fidelity, that Fidelity was going to introduce crypto trading. That was several episodes ago. I haven't heard anything from Fidelity since that announcement. I think it was on CryptoTalk #1, which was probably about 2 months ago. I haven't heard anything from them. The last I heard that they had applied for a New York trust license. The New York trust license is going to take a lot longer than a BIT license because it's a lot more expansive. I know the trust license does allow a firm to operate a broader crypto business. So it could be possible that maybe Fidelity could be going into some type of financial advice or something like that. But I know the BIT license is hard to get, but the New York trust license is even harder, and that's what Fidelity applied for. I think they announced originally that they were going to allow the trading on, I think it was back in May or June, but just so you know, for this person in Jersey, it's only for institutional customers. So it's not open for retail investors like you and me. But for retail customers, I think maybe Robinhood, E-Trade, or Circle, some of those might be applicable for retail investors. So you might want to try those. Or if anyone else out there knows where retail investors could do some cryptos through some of these brokerages accounts. I think E-Trade mentioned, but I haven't heard anything from them either. But they might have already approved it. I'm not exactly sure. So just let me read out this disclaimer again, just because this could be construed as financial advice, which it's not. You should speak to your accountant, your financial advisor, or whoever you speak to before you act on anything that we talk about here. But this discussion is for informational and educational purposes only. Viewers are advised to conduct their own independent research into any of the topics discussed. The discussions are not the opinions of Camfrog, PalTalk, or PeerStream. So I don't know if there were any other questions. I still have some other ones that people emailed Briley. If you don't think of a question now and you want to email it to us, just email it to cryptotalk@peerstream.com, and we'll get to it on our next episode next week. Here's a question from someone in California. What do you think about investment in altcoins? So my opinion right now at the moment, I'm not really a big fan of altcoins. I have a few altcoins, not many altcoins. I used to have a lot more. I sold a lot of them off when I saw that they were tanking. Right now, in my opinion, they're riskier than Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin, if you don't have any crypto exposure, I think Bitcoin would be where I would put money to work. Eventually, I think the altcoins might come around, but there's so many of those coins out there that people refer to as shit coins or garbage coins or whatever you want to call them. I don't think that they're all garbage coins, but there's a lot of coins out there that made some huge promises. I read through dozens of white papers back in 2017 and 2018, early 2018, and I couldn't really make heads or tails out of a lot of these white papers. A lot of them you could see, it was clear that they were copy jobs. There were even some typos in some of these white papers that were copied over to the new white paper. And believe it or not, people just started investing in them because you could get 10 of those coins for a penny or whatever the case was. But I think that right now, if I had a choice, I would probably invest more in the Bitcoin rather than some of the altcoins. And if you are going to invest in some of the altcoins, I think you should go in the top 10 or top 20. There's 2,700 coins out there according to CoinMarketCap, and in another 12 months, I don't think there's going to be a lot less altcoins, and you don't want to get stuck buying those ones that sound like they're so cheap. This is a big misconception that a lot of people had back in 2017, which drove the crypto market. They were newbies, and they basically said, well, I could buy Bitcoin for 18,000, or I could buy one of these altcoins for 2 pennies, or I could get 5 for a penny. So what they thought was that they could basically buy, tens of thousands of these coins for a couple of $100 instead of buying Bitcoin. Unfortunately, if you would have bought at the wrong time, those tanked. Some of them were down 90%, 95%. I know that because I had some of them that were down 90%. It was money that I invested back in 2017 and 2018. I basically took some long shots. I put a small amount of money into them. They went up a lot. I sold off some, but I got stuck with some. I had some residual altcoins in my Bittrex and my Binance account. And by the time Bittrex and Binance told us to get rid of our holdings, that they weren't going to be allowed in the United States anymore, some of the coins were, selling for, $20, and I basically sold out for $5. So sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. But once the Bitcoin goes back up towards the all-time high, which might be in 2020, I think the altcoins will start coming back, because what people do is they start diversifying. So if you bought a Bitcoin at, say, 3,000 or 4,000 in 2000, say in the last year you bought it cheap and it goes up to 20,000, you might want to sell some of it. You might want to sell half. But what some people do is they don't just sell it. They basically sell it and they reinvest it in some of the other coins that they're big fans of. So that's a diversification technique that some people follow. Some people, as soon as they double their money, they'll sell half, which I've done many times. If you're lucky enough to double it, you basically sell half and you just run with their principal. So that's a technique that a lot of people use on Wall Street with stocks, and a lot of people are following that with crypto as well. So that's that question. Here's a person in Florida. They didn't say they were from Florida, but the question is, Bitcoin payments. How come businesses in Florida don't accept? So there's a lot of reasons. The number one reason, I think, is that right now it's too volatile. So it's too volatile to be used as an everyday payments rail. So I think over time, the volatility might slow down. But right now, the principal use case is it's an emergent store of value. It's not really used as a payments rail, especially in the United States, because in the United States, there's tax repercussions. As you know, we've mentioned in the last few episodes about those IRS letters that are going out. Right now, if you invest in Bitcoin in the United States, you're supposed to self-report. So you're required to basically fill out your Schedule D and whatever other forms you need to fill out when you file your taxes by April 15th. A lot of the cryptocurrency platforms out there are not based in the United States. Most of them don't send you a 1099, a K-1, or any type of tax document. So what you're required to do is you're supposed to be self-reporting. Now, if you're going to go to Starbucks, and Starbucks eventually, I honestly believe they will start accepting Bitcoin through QR codes or whatever. As of right now, that's a taxable event. So if you go up and buy a cup of coffee for $3 at Starbucks, that you're supposed to claim, which I know it sounds crazy, you're supposed to claim that on your taxes. If you bought Bitcoin at, say, for argument's sake, let's make it easy, you bought Bitcoin at 10,000 last week, and today you went and bought a cup of coffee at Starbucks or a vendor in New York City, and you paid $3 for a cup of coffee. That would actually be a capital gain, because your Bitcoin that you sold off to buy the Starbucks coffee, that $3 worth of Bitcoin, you probably only paid maybe $2 and maybe $2.90 for it. So there's 10 cents of capital gain on that. I know it sounds crazy, but that's what you're supposed to be doing. So if you buy a large ticket item with Bitcoin, or you buy some altcoins and you buy Bitcoin for 10,000 and you exchange it for, say, you buy some ADA, you buy some Cardano at 10,300, that would be a capital gain of $300. So that's a little challenging. Hopefully the regulations will change and they'll come up with some type of mechanism where it makes it easier. But that's one of the number one reasons why a lot of companies in the United States won't accept Bitcoin. There's several other reasons as well. One thing is settlement, one thing is transaction fees. But in Florida, I'm not sure how many businesses you've seen, but in New York City, I see businesses that do have an accept Bitcoin sign on their window. I don't have a wallet on my phone. My Bitcoins, thank God, a lot of them are in cold storage, so I don't really have them readily available to purchase a meal at a restaurant. There are places in Brooklyn that accept Bitcoin, and I've also seen the Bitcoin ATMs at JFK, the airport here in New York. So in New York, I think it's because of the commerce we have here and the amount of people we have here that use Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin might be a little more prevalent in New York than it is in Florida. So I think as the sector matures, though, and I think Bitcoin's role will change. I consider it an alternative asset class, but it's each day that goes on, it's more and more like an alternative asset class, an emergent asset class, and I think it's going to be. I think it'll be accepted in more places in New York and Florida over time. So that's that question. We had another question. They didn't say where they were from, but it said, how does Bitcoin and Libra differ from other forms of digital currencies and payment methods? That's a really good question. The first thing I'd like to address on that question, though, is I wouldn't really consider Bitcoin and Libra in the same category. Bitcoin's an open system. Libra's a closed system, and it's basically permissioned, and there will be a gatekeeper with Libra when it first comes out. I don't really consider it a true cryptocurrency. It is centralized, whereas Bitcoin is not centralized. But Bitcoin is not centralized, and Libra will be centralized. So I don't want to really focus too much on that. But basically, I think in no way will Libra offer the same protections as Bitcoin. Bitcoin offers protections by design. There are a lot of other payment methods that you asked about and out there, like for instance, Paytm and M-Pesa. They offer mobile payments and other types of way people could pay each other in Africa and Asia. Those are centralized as well. So I think Bitcoin, the answer to that question is that because Bitcoin is decentralized, there's going to be a big difference between, say, the Venmos and the PayPals and all the other things that people are using to send people money. So, for instance, when we go out for lunch here, a lot of times we'll basically just Venmo each other the payments. First of all, that's done with a fiat currency. I'm sending, say, Briley or Arash or somebody here, I'm basically sending them fiat currency as opposed to Bitcoin. You're going to be sending them Bitcoin. So that's a big difference between the payment methods that you mentioned as well. WeChat also, it's centralized. That's another one out there that some people use to pay people. And also some of these platforms and payment methods, they have a T+1 day settle. Bitcoin will usually settle pretty quickly. I know Venmo, when I send somebody payment in Venmo, it's pretty quick, but there are some that are still T+1 day, which is really slow, especially for 2019. I'm doing a project here at work where I'm trying to track how long it takes for a wire to hit some of our overseas vendors. And so far, it's a week to 2 weeks. That's a long time. So when we pay somebody over in Singapore or wherever they are, and they're like, hey, you could wire us the money. In the United States, we used to wire people money, say from New York to New Jersey, and it would be pretty quick. It'd be quicker than sending a check, and it was also Fed funds. It was available that day. And that was the way we used to view, a wire transfer or just let's consider it a wire transfer. They used to be so quick. But what people don't realize, when you're sending overseas money to, an overseas client, based upon my research just here at PureStream, it's sometimes taken a week to 2 weeks. 2 weeks is an extreme case, but it takes 2 weeks, and that's an actual wire. One of the reasons is there's several intermediaries involved. As opposed to Bitcoin, if I'm going to be sending a Bitcoin to, the average Joe or the average Josephine, I'm going to send the Bitcoin today, and I'm going to have it probably within 10 minutes to an hour, possibly, with no middlemen, no intermediaries. Now, if I sent Joe or Josephine this wire transfer, and she was over in, say, Singapore, or she was in Sri Lanka, there would probably be a minimum of 5 intermediaries, and each of those make a small fee, obviously. And the reason why it takes so long with these wire transfers is nobody trusts the other intermediaries. So there is a problem with trust, as opposed to Bitcoin. With Bitcoin, we don't have that trust issue. So if somebody sends the money from here to, say, Sri Lanka, those 5 people, each person is waiting for those funds to clear before they actually send it off to the next intermediary or corresponding bank. So basically, they don't trust they don't trust the other third party, so they wait for that to clear, and each one of those might take a day or 2 days, and that's why it takes, say, a week to 2 weeks to send these wire transfers. So I think that they're going to try to make these processes a lot more streamlined, but I think it's because of Bitcoin and because of these cryptocurrencies that they have to either adapt, or people are just going to basically migrate to Bitcoin eventually. It's not going to take place overnight, but it's going to take some time. So that's that question. So somebody asked from Quincerty, he asked, how can Facebook have a currency without a banking system in place? They don't have a banking system in place. I know just today, Facebook, I read that they applied for some type of banking license over in Switzerland. So obviously, Facebook's not going to be, Libra's not going to go live for another 6 months to a year minimum. There's a lot of regulatory hurdles. They're getting a lot of heat now. Congress here in the United States, for those of you who live in the United States, was on a break in August. So we didn't really hear too much. You noticed that we didn't see any headlines, or you didn't see a lot of news about Facebook and Libra. It's because they were on a break. But now they're back from a break, and now you're starting to see the waters getting choppy again. There's a lot more news stories about Facebook. But I did read today that they applied for a banking license over in Switzerland. So eventually they will have these licenses in place in New York. Obviously, they'll have to file with the regulators here in New York if they want to do business in New York. And that's why I think they're not going to go live for 6 months to a year. And that's if they actually go live that fast. So that's the answer to that question. Hopefully you're happy with that answer. If not, you can send a follow-up question. Another question I have, this person is from Kentucky. I bought 1 Bitcoin on Gemini. What's the best way to keep it safe? So we've gone over similar type questions in earlier episodes, but my number one answer is basically to take it off the exchange Gemini. I love Gemini. Gemini is, in my opinion, a solid exchange. But if you could put it on a Trezor device, if you're not going to be using the Bitcoin and you're just holding it as a store of value, an emerging store of value, like we call it, if you're just holding it for a year or 2 years or even 3 years, you're better off just taking it off the exchange and putting it on a cold storage. Once you download the software for Trezor or for any other cold storage devices, you could actually put it on the cold storage device, but there's also an alternative way. They give you these things called recovery seeds, where once you download the software and you put the device into your computer, it gives you these recovery seeds because you could lose that device. So if you lose that Trezor device or the device that you're using, the Nano device, if you lose it, your coins are not necessarily lost. What happens is they're going to give you a recovery seed, which is 12 to 24 words. So what you're going to do is you're going to write down those words. It'll give you a word like eyeglass. You're going to write down eyeglass. It's going to give you a word like table. You're going to write that down. So if you're lucky enough and they only give you 12 words, you could write it down and you can memorize those words. So you could actually dispose of that Trezor device or that Nano device if you could just remember those 12 words in that order. Because if you remember those 12 words in that order, that's how you're going to get access to that Bitcoin you bought on Gemini. So it's very simple. 12 words, easy to memorize. If you lose that piece of paper or it gets burnt in a fire or something, I would recommend you put that in a safety deposit box, but not in the same safety deposit box where you have your device. Just in case you lose the key, the bank goes out of business, you end up hitting a lotto and you end up coming back to that bank later on and it's gone. But that's my advice, is basically to take it off the exchange and put it into some cold storage somewhere. And also to remember to write down those recovery seeds, those 12 to 24 words, because that's very important. So those were some of the those are some of the questions that we had, either live questions or questions that were emailed into us. It's 45-minute episode. I think we're going to be wrapping up unless anybody has any further questions. But before we go, I just wanted to do some shout-outs to some people that have been instrumental in getting this show started, Alex and Jason. We also have Briley, Mike, and Dan. They help with our pre-production. Briley's here right now, and she's the one that basically makes sure everything's operating properly. And also Jared, Caitlin, and Jane for their assistance in marketing this and letting people know through the push notifications that we're going to be having a show that day. So we should be having another show next week. I apologize, Jason Katz never got out of his meeting, but it's no problem. He might join us for next week's episode. He has some things that he wants to talk to you guys about, and you guys could ask him some questions regarding CryptoTalk, Camfrog, regarding our crypto holdings, things like that. So we'll make an announcement about our next show next week. Either we'll have Jason as a guest or we'll have somebody else. We have a bunch of people lined up as guests, but unfortunately, due to scheduling conflicts and the time that we have these episodes, sometimes they can't get out of work. Some people cancel the same day, and it's hard to get guests. If you know of any guests that you think might want to be a guest on the show, just do me a favor and just send an email to CryptoTalk@purestream.com, and we'll take a look and review them. So I hope some of you receive value from the show, and hopefully you learned something. And hopefully we'll see you guys next week on our next episode. Thank you.